midnight Eastern Wartime, WEAF, New York. Good evening, everybody. This is Lyle Van reporting from the NBC newsroom in New York. The first 24 hours of invasion, history-making hours, have about run their course. It was 12:30 o'clock yesterday morning, Eastern Wartime, that the first Americans set foot on the rocky coast of France, followed 1 hour later by Canadian and British troops. Since then, amphibious and parachute troops have consolidated beachheads and positions along a 60-mile strip of coast between Le Havre and Cherbourg, have penetrated several miles inland from the sea in some places. The invasion is proceeding in a thoroughly satisfactory manner. A Navy man just back from the invasion coast says all main points have been gained. There's an air of unmistakable optimism at General Eisenhower's headquarters, wrinkled only by one factor, the threat of bad weather over the Channel tonight. Reinforcements are being rushed to the Norman coast to strengthen the troops landed there already. But the Channel is being whipped by a rising wind. The barometer is falling. It was bad weather that prevented the invasion thrust from starting 1 day sooner than it did. And now the unpredictable Channel weatherman is acting up again. Satisfactory progress for our invasion forces is relayed from both German and Allied quarters. London says our invasion troops are making headway against opposition much weaker than expected. Allied casualties are much lighter than expected. President Roosevelt spoke to the nation by radio an hour or so ago, requested the people of America to join him in a prayer that the Allies may prevail over the enemy, that they may build a sure peace. He prefaced his prayer with the remark that our assault of liberation has met with success to this hour. Earlier in the day, at a news conference, the chief made reference to our naval losses, disclosed that 2 destroyers and 1 landing craft were the Allied naval losses to the first hours of invasion. 3 craft lost out of a total of more than 4,000 taking part. The German High Command says fighting in the Cherbourg-Le Havre area is in full swing, that the Anglo-Americans are putting up a most tenacious resistance. NBC Radio, which is German-controlled, admits the Allied beachhead area has been considerably widened and Allied reinforcements are pouring in. A dispatch from London states a great force of RAF bombers left an East Coast airdrome in England tonight are streaming southward in one solid procession. More than 1,000 troop-carrying gliders took part in the early stages of the invasion. More Allied troops were dropped from planes by parachute. Overall, 11,000 planes of all descriptions took part in the greatest aerial operation the world has ever seen. There are indications tonight that the Germans are losing touch with some of their battle groups, that they're not sure where the main force of the Allied assault will strike. One German broadcast from Berlin, one for home consumption, said, "We do not want to report now on the hard fighting going on all over Normandy. We're fighting a tough enemy. It's not an easy job." The British Ministry of Supplies says military power of the greatest magnitude is being employed by the Allies, including many secret weapons never before used. But by the time the sun was setting this evening, the Germans had not yet used their secret rocket guns, the ones that were supposed to have devastated southeast England. And the Germans say they expect new Allied landings along the coast of France, northward in the area of Boulogne and Calais. But the bad weather over the Channel augurs against such a move at this time. This vast military venture, far too big to picture at one glance, was made up of many component parts, hundreds of specialists and the machines of war doing their specific job, the sum total adding up to success in the first 24 hours of operations. Take the minesweepers, for example. They swept in first in the dark hours yesterday morning. Their job was to clear a path for the mighty fleet that was to follow. Converted fishing trawlers, coal burners, that served in the First World War, ships still on the secret list. These were the fleet of little boats that paved the way. They used sweep wires to tear loose the mines that barred the way to the French coast. There's no report of any of these gallant little craft being lost at this hour. They performed their tasks silently and efficiently. Behind them came the great battle wagons and their supporting warships. Each had their appointed task, an appointed target along that invasion strip. The gunners were assigned the most precise task, that of keeping their aim straight and true. 6 of Britain's battleships defied German coastal guns, sailed in close to wham salvos into German shore positions. At least 3 American battle wagons, the Nevada, the Texas, and the Arkansas, perhaps more, were there on the job, too. The aim of these Allied gunners was very accurate indeed. Coast guns silenced before they had time to inflict any damage worth mentioning on the Allied fleet. British warships alone poured 2,000 tons of shells into the French coast every 10 minutes. 600 warships banging away at one time. What a great noise that must have been. And behind this cannonade came another group of specialists, the invasion craft themselves. This snub-nosed fleet was equipped with its own firepower, came in shooting in the wake of the job done by the Navy. The men who manned those invasion boats had a job to do, and they did it well. And the fighting men who took the rough ride across the channel to land on the beaches, why, the words of General Eisenhower's communique speaks eloquently enough of the job they've done. But let's pause a minute and consider the task assigned to our paratroopers. They were the first to hit the invasion coast. They flew over the hazards at sea, the hazards on the beaches, the hazards behind the beaches. They dropped down right in the middle of a hard-bitten, determined enemy, perhaps the most dangerous undertaking of all. There's been no detailed account of their fighting behind the front. They're battling in the region of Caen, 10 miles inland from the sea, and that point of resistance must be manned by our parachute troops tonight. Our amphibious forces haven't had time to drive that deep in from the landing beaches. Thousands upon thousands of paratroopers, both British and American, were dropped behind the Atlantic Wall. The spokesman at headquarters in London says he's not in a position to give out a detailed report of what has happened since they dropped from the sky. But they're armed with knives and Tommy guns, assigned to blow bridges, disrupt enemy transport lines, cause as much confusion as they can where it'll do the most good. Before taking off on their flight across the channel, they were wished Godspeed by the boss himself, General Ike Eisenhower, who spent 7 hours touring aerodromes from which the air troops were to take off. And after chatting with the last of them, the boss climbed to a roof, watched the aerial procession as squadron after squadron flew off to the east. We know there was very little mishap to that paratroop armada while in the air. The big Dakota transport planes flew with running lights to keep formation, but met almost no opposition from the once-vaunted Luftwaffe. And perhaps one of the most colorful parts of the invasion is the story of the truly American Indians that took part. Indian parachute troops, composed of Yaqui and Cherokee tribesmen, shaved their heads down to a scalp lock, just as their forebears did in previous wars. The Indians were trained in demolition, carried 180 pounds of equipment on their backs, went into battle with red and black war paint on their faces. Included, too, in the paratroop division were a Hindu high diver, many daredevil automobile divers, former college athletes. Brave men all, these paratroopers, and they're fighting somewhere ahead of the front lines on the French invasion coast tonight. It's only fair to speak of the airmen last. Not that our pilots and bombardiers have not done a daring and superb job, but because they've been in the news spotlight for many months now, doing the same kind of job they did last night and today. The thoroughness of their work can be read in the report tonight that enemy opposition is lighter than expected, that Allied casualties are lighter than expected, that the invasion operation is proceeding according to plan. And as Prime Minister Winston Churchill terms it, what a plan. They laid a carpet of bombs along the selected landing spots, combined with our naval gunners to dynamite a path through enemy fortifications. Our airmen flew in bad weather, rain, and poor visibility that the Luftwaffe dared not risk. All told, somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 Allied planes took to the air, opposed by a mere 50 German planes. Almost 200 Allied planes to one German aircraft. Radio Berlin, monitored by NBC, gives this lame excuse for the Luftwaffe failing to come up and fight. Poor visibility. But it didn't keep our planes aground. There's little doubt, though, that Reich Marshal Hermann Goering will send his Luftwaffe against our invasion forces. He put himself on record with this statement today. The invasion must be crushed, even if it means the annihilation of the German Air Force. And we hope it does mean that. We have eyewitness reports, first-hand accounts of war reporters who went in with the troops. Ed Hawker of NBC flew over the invasion area in a reconnaissance plane, reported no German planes anywhere in sight. Howard Marshall of BBC went ashore with the first assault troops. He rode in one of the invasion craft, came back to London in clothes dripping from seawater. Here's his story. Our barge ran into a maze of anti-invasion spikes driven in the shallow water just out from the beaches. Spikes driven into the bottom with mines attached to the top. We hit one of them. The mine exploded with a great noise. A hole was blown in the bottom of our barge. But the men let down the ramp, and a Bren gun carrier drove out, fell into 5 feet of water. The men kept going toward the beaches. A second division of assault troops followed the one I was with. Soon the waves of troops had disappeared up over the beach. More followed in their wake, and the beachhead was established. There are many other eyewitness accounts, all giving pretty much the same picture. Beachheads nailed down with speed and dispatch. beachmasters taking control in a jiffy, assigning weapons and supplies to assault units, the invasion rolling forward with very few hitches. The American troops who boarded their invasion craft in England last night seemed unaware that they were standing at the crossroads of history, that they were to help make that history. They jumped aboard with shaved heads, with $4 in invasion money, and right away there were poker and crap games in progress, even while they were waiting to pull out for the big task. One American staff sergeant had hundreds of dollars worth of invasion currency, and he passed it off with this remark: "I like to travel heavy. There's lots of stuff I want to buy when I get over there." There's still a vast hidden army, waiting and ready to swing into action, the French underground. General de Gaulle has made a stirring appeal to that underground army of France, exhorted them to fight with all the means at their disposal to destroy the Germans. At this hour, that hidden fighting force is still waiting, instructed by General Eisenhower to hold its fire until the appointed signal is given. The Germans are well aware of this unseen menace. They've launched a campaign of threats promising dire penalty if any Frenchman is caught in the act of sabotage. But the people of France will be ready when the proper time is at hand. A glance at other war fronts, almost buried by the avalanche of reports from invasion headquarters. American planes took off from bases in Soviet Russia today, bombed German aerodromes at Galati in Romania. Then they flew back to their Russian bases, the first American raid of the war from bases in Russian territory. Official Moscow reports the German offensive in Romania slackening after more than a week of attacks. And there are semi-official rumors in the Soviet capital that the grand summer offensive may soon be launched in the east to coincide with the Allied jump across the Channel. In Yugoslavia, Marshal Tito says he's launched a new offensive, captured 6 towns in that Balkan nation. Down in the South Pacific, mopping up operations continue on Biak Island. But in Southeast Asia, American bombers smashed Bangkok, the capital of Thailand, with its heaviest blow of the war. J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, warns all police and other law enforcement bodies to be on the alert, to watch for any sign of sabotage now that the invasion is underway. Solemn ceremonies were in order at West Point today, graduation exercises for cadets of our military academy. And those ceremonies were interrupted by a thunderous round of applause as Cadet John Eisenhower stepped to the platform to receive his diploma. The son of the Allied invasion commander was commissioned as second lieutenant in the infantry, assigned to Fort Benning, Georgia, for advanced training. In a late dispatch from London, in the first news dispatch sent from the soil of France, Canadian press war correspondent Ross Monroe says that in 2 hours and 45 minutes of fighting, the Canadian invasion force had won its beachhead and shoved on inland. Monroe quotes the message the Canadian commander sent to Lieutenant General Creeder: "Beachhead taken, well on way to immediate objective." And here are some late bulletins picked up from the British radio by our monitors here in the NBC newsroom. The first German prisoners taken in the invasion operations have been landed in British ports. RAF pilots returning from low-level flights over the beachheads say the Allied forces appear to be doing very well, that there's no longer any sign of enemy opposition on the beaches. The Allies have already put up barrage balloons over captured sections of the French coast. Here at home, the nation marked the invasion report with silent prayer, the praying perhaps most noticeable in the nation's so-called gay spots. In New York City, war workers, shop workers, bankers, all turned their thoughts to God in the great crisis. Mayor LaGuardia calls city employees and officials into his office at noon for a special service. The New York Stock Exchange halted activity for 2 minutes to beseech divine help for our invasion troops. Many thousands of New York shop girls were sent home after working a half day with instruction to pray and hope for victory. The nation's racetracks call off their programs in observance of the day. In all corners of the nation, all persons, and that means everyone who has a friend or relative in the great adventure, all paused and prayed consciously or unconsciously for its success. And at a port in South England late today, a minesweeper eased up to a dock just back from the invasion coast. No one cheered. There was a call for the medical corps. That minesweeper was bringing the first American wounded, the first American dead, back from the battle area. It's a reminder that the invasion, while being the greatest event of the war, is also a grim and deadly business. And the full deadliness will not be known until the great battles of the future are fought along the road to Berlin. This is Lyle Van saying good night from the NBC newsroom in New York City. This is the National Broadcasting Company.
NBC is standing by to bring you the complete news coverage of the invasion. Any and all programs will be interrupted for bulletins as they come through. Stay tuned to WEIF, New York.
Following its procedure of Invasion Day coverage, NBC will interrupt this program to bring you the latest news developments as they are received from overseas. From Chicago, we bring you Roy Shield and the orchestra. The opening number on the program this evening, My Ideal. velvet voice of Jean McKenna is heard now in a mood of intermittent sentimentality as she tells you, "Sometimes I'm happy."
Sometimes I'm happy, sometimes I'm blue. My disposition depends on you. I never mind the rain find the sun in your eyes. Sometimes I love you, sometimes I hate you, but when I hate you, it's 'cause I love you. That's how I am, and what can I do? I'm happy when I'm with you. Sometimes I'm happy, sometimes I'm blue. My disposition depends on you. I never mind the rain from the sky if I can find the sun in your eyes. Sometimes I love you, sometimes I hate you, but when I hate you, that's because I love you. That's how I am, so what can I do? I'm happy when I'm with you. That's how I am, so what can I do? I'm happy when I'm with you.
Roy Shield and the orchestra take you on a rhythmic treasure hunt in three-quarter time that has, as a reward, the shining melodies of the Gold and Silver Waltz.
Ladies and gentlemen, the National Broadcasting Company is interrupting all its programs to bring you the latest news as it is received on the invasion story. The German news agency Transocean has just reported that the Allies have made further landings at the mouth of the Orne River under cover of naval artillery. The agency says heavy fighting is raging on the coast of northern France. We return you now to the program in progress.
The blazing sun of skies below the border throws everything in brilliant contrast, including the music loved by our good neighbors to the south. Sometimes it's the snap of the rumba, sometimes the soft sorrow of La Paloma. In time with the speed of today's movements, we bring you España Cañí. We pause briefly for station identification.
WEAF, New York.
You are listening to the music of Roy Shield and the orchestra, presenting a program of tunes that you love. And here is a soft melody, Brightly Shines the Moon. Ziegfeld Follies of fond memory brought us many stage spectacles and many hit tunes. But none of them more clearly earmarks these grand productions than the tune that glorifies the American girl. A pretty girl is like a melody. A tune whose tempo is set to the rhythm of American thoughts tonight. Roy Shield and the orchestra bring you the stirring march cadence from Suite Algérienne. Roy Shield flips his baton in a musical tribute to a good neighbor, whose capital has also given us a great tune, Montevideo. conclusion, from Roy Shield and the orchestra, a wish that you rest softly and sweetly all through the night. From Chicago, the National Broadcasting Company has brought you the music of Roy Shield and the orchestra with vocalist Gene McKenna. A program of lovely melodies for your listening pleasure. This is the National Broadcasting Company.
The future of the world hangs on the outcome of the final struggle between the Allies and Nazi Germany. NBC will provide complete news coverage of the invasion. Stay tuned to WEIF, New York.
Good morning. This is Robert St. John bringing you up to date with the invasion news. Since I talked to you a little more than 1 hour ago, we've obtained some details about what happened on the French beaches when the Allied invasion struck. One dispatch says there were few Nazi survivors along the shore after the punishing sea and air bombardment. The ground troops which went ashore found the few Germans they encountered so dazed that they were quickly killed or captured. That is one reason why our casualties have thus far been so slight. Axis radios have listed 15 places at which Allied landings were made. There's no sense reading the names of all the towns and villages mentioned by the enemy, because most of them are small French settlements which few of us have ever heard of. But one thing seems certain, as the second day of the invasion is about to start. It's dawn over there now, you know. As the invaders watch the sun come up over France for a second time, we hold a strip of France about 100 miles long and as much as 15 miles deep at several points. There's a report that we've cut the one railroad which leads from the heart of France down into the Cherbourg Peninsula. If that is true, the Nazis will be hard put to it to supply their troops defending that finger of land called Normandy. That finger of land which sticks out into the English Channel and comes just 80 miles from touching that island called Britain. If and when we occupy all of the Normandy Peninsula, we will be well on our way to our first major objective in Western Europe, the French capital of Paris. It was a great day when American and British troops marched into Rome. It will be a greater day when Paris is liberated from the Nazis. And now here's an interesting report, the report of an RAF flyer just back from swooping low over the beaches. He says that the beaches are all in our hands, and as proof, he cites the fact that all of the Allied soldiers he saw were moving ahead, standing up. Well, they wouldn't be doing that if there was very much enemy opposition. The best story we've received since I last talked to you is one written over in France on a portable typewriter by a real frontline correspondent who's a good friend of mine, Ross Monroe, a Canadian attached to the Canadian forces now in France. The Canadian units, and I'm sure they included some of the survivors of Dieppe, were given a certain spot on the French coastline which they were to take. Well, war correspondent Ross Monroe, who went ashore with the Canadian boys, now reports that they took their beachhead in exactly 2 hours and 45 minutes of fighting at the edge of the water, and then they started moving inland. Their commander flashed back a message, beachhead taken, well on way to immediate objective. Even the Canadian boys who were not on that ill-fated Dieppe operation were eager to get some revenge for what the Nazis did to their countrymen that time. War correspondent Monroe says the strip of beach the Canadians did liberate is not very long, and yet it will provide a good landing place, a good base where men and supplies can now be dumped. And then he goes on to tell us something no other correspondent has mentioned. He says there's been some stiff fighting, some street fighting, in little French coastal towns today. About what happened down on the beaches, the Canadian reporter tells us that the Nazis had planted numerous steel and wooden obstacles in the shallow water. He doesn't describe just what they were. I imagine censorship prevented that. Anyway, these obstacles had been placed so that when the tide was high, they couldn't be seen. And yet they were a menace, and a very serious menace to the invaders. Fortunately, however, the invasion barges reached this spot before high tide, and so Canadian engineers quickly cleared the water of the strange obstacles, the secret weapons of the Nazis. The Canadians, as they swarmed ashore, were met by considerable machine gun and mortar and artillery fire, but by 10 a.m., they were a full 1,000 yards from the water and going ahead strong, meeting only scattered pockets of Germans. Ross Monroe tells us that Canadian and British airborne troops did a grand job. Some of those who landed by glider immediately seized and held some very important bridges, thus preventing the Nazis from destroying them. Monroe had words of high praise for the men out in the ships, those ships which laid down the withering barrage which enabled the ground troops to get ashore with so few casualties. He tells how one cruiser knocked out a battery, a Nazi battery, of course, about 1.5 miles inland, a battery which was giving the Canadians plenty of trouble. The cruiser's guns fired just 6 shots. The last one knocked the Nazi guns out of action, and the Canadians were able to forge ahead. Monroe gives us a graphic description of what it looks like over there now. He says the entire coast of France, as far as you can see, is wreathed in heavy smoke, smoke from thousands of bombs and shells, and also from rifle fire. He tells how destroyers and cruisers are prowling up and down the channel, eager to finish off anything that may show up. You've heard that expression, an air umbrella. It's trite, it's a hackneyed expression, but I don't know of any other to describe the protection which British and American planes have been giving our ships and our men these past 24 hours. It is an umbrella. All day yesterday and all night tonight, Spitfires and Lightnings have come sweeping in. They've taken up hovering positions over the ships and over the men on the beaches. They stay there until more Allied planes come to relieve them. And so the men on the ships and the men on the ground don't have much worrying to do about death from the sky. The Canadian correspondent also tells us that the night is made bright in some spots by burning buildings which have come within the range of naval guns or the bombs of our planes. And now let's see if we don't have a couple of last-minute bulletins for you. Here's one. Prime Minister Churchill has just promised in Commons that he will make a new statement today on overnight developments in the Allied invasion of France. And here's another one. The German news agency Transocean says that the Allies have made further landings at the mouth of the Orne River under cover of naval artillery. Well, that's the invasion news up to 1 a.m. on the morning of June the 7th. And this is Robert St. John going off to bed with a good night to you.
Thank you, and good night to you, Mr. St. John. This is the National Broadcasting Company. Sea reporters are standing by to bring you the latest invasion news. Any and all programs will be interrupted for invasion bulletins. Keep listening to WEIF.
The National Broadcasting Company gives you a moment for meditation. In a village of France, an eager crowd sought a friar and cried aloud, "Come, ring the bells. Good news has come at last."
In a village of France, an eager crowd sought a friar and cried aloud, "Come, ring the bells. Good news has come at last." Friar Jacques, do you hear? Do you hear? Cannons in the distance echo with persistence. Ding, dang, dong, ding, dang, dong. Friar Jacques, listen now, listen now. Battle cries are sounding, bugle calls resounding. Ding, dang, dong, ding, dang, dong. Friar Jacques, here they come, here they come. Ring the bells of freedom, ring the bells of freedom. Ding, dang, dong, ding, dang, dong.
Good night. Good night. Ah, good the night that warps thee in its silver light. Good night. No night is good for me, that does not hold a thought of thee. Good night.
When twilight falls on the dim old walls, and day is past and gone, as we sit and dream in the fading dream, come memories one by one. Old friends known in the years long gone, in a fancy greet us still, and voices dear that we long to hear. The silence seems to fill. Just when the day is over, just when the lights are low, back to the heart returneth life's golden long ago. Far, far away we wander, watching the firelight gleams. Far, far away from the world's shadows gray, into the land of dreams. Just when the day is over, just when the lights are low, back to the heart returneth life's golden long ago. Far, far away we wander, watching the firelight gleams. Far, far away from the world's shadows gray, into the land of beautiful land of dreams. Into our land of dreams.
Shall I, wasting in despair, die because a woman's fair? Or make pale my cheeks with care, 'cause another's rosy are? Be she fairer than the day, or the flowery meads in May, if she thinks not well of me, what care I how fair she be? unaffrighted by the silence round them, undistracted by the sights they see. These demand not, but the things without them yield them love, amusement, sympathy. And with joy the stars perform their shining, and the sea its long moon-silvered roll. For self-poised they live, nor pine with noting all the fever in some differing soul.
Out of the night that covers me, black as a pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever God may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbound. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
Our God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter from the stormy blast, and our eternal home. Before the hills in order stood, or earth received her frame, from everlasting thou art God, to endless years the same.
Our God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter from the stormy blast.
This was a moment for meditation, during which you heard the Mood Weavers Quartet with George Shackley at the organ. Tomorrow night, same time, over most of these same stations, more words of inspiration and restful music. Until then, this is Jack Costello inviting you to join us again in a moment for meditation. This is the National Broadcasting Company.
On every front, the armies of the United Nations are on the march. NBC reporters are standing by to bring you the latest invasion bulletins. Stay tuned to WEIF, New York. Don Hollenbeck follows in just a moment.
This is Don Hollenbeck in the NBC newsroom in New York. It's now just over 24 hours since Allied troops hit the beach in France, and still the reports of our progress, actual reports of miles gained, definite localities where fighting is going on, continue to come mainly from the enemy. General Eisenhower's headquarters have issued 2 communiques. Both say things are going well, casualties have been very light. Allied leaders from President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill on down have expressed their satisfaction. And a Navy man just back in London from the beach says all the main points have been gained. The general situation seems to be that the Allied forces have cleared the beaches of a 60-mile stretch of Normandy of enemy troops. Armor-backed landing parties are ranging inland early Wednesday. It's almost full daylight at the scene at this moment. And reinforcements are streaming across the channel, not hindered by a rough sea and a bad wind. Reports reached London that the Paris-Cherbourg railway line had been cut at Caen. That railway is the main line supplying German forces in the Cherbourg Peninsula. The German High Command, however, insists that no Allied troops have got into Caen, and this contradicts Prime Minister Churchill's assertion today that Allied troops were fighting in this railway city. RAF pilots have been coming back with good news all night. One of them said, "We could tell the beaches were secure. We could see our soldiers standing up." And to me, who spent some time prone at Salerno, to anyone who was on that beach, that means a lot. We now know that the first ground forces to land on the French beaches just 24 hours ago were Americans. They went ashore at 6:30 a.m., followed by Canadians and British an hour later. Combined British and American paratroopers shared the honors of being the first soldiers of the liberating armies to set foot on French soil. They had battled the Germans for several hours before the main landings. In the first dispatch received tonight from the soil of France, it was reported that the Canadian invasion force won its beachhead and moved inland after just 2 hours and 45 minutes of fighting, which must have been savage. The Canadians have well and truly wiped out the bitter memory of Dieppe. Penetrations as deep as 13 miles into France have been reported, and the German radios have been buzzing with reports of Allied landings at a dozen points, with the latest and most important on both sides of the estuary of the River Orne. These reports are from the enemy, patently put out as feelers, put out to make possible Allied setbacks later seem more serious than they are. For the record, but to be taken with caution, here is where the enemy says our forces have landed along a 100-mile shoreline. The port of Harfleur, 15 miles east of Cherbourg, and the village 5 miles south of Harfleur. Both sides of the highway from Carentan to Valognes, a section of an important supply road to Cherbourg running 5 miles inland, an area 27 miles long between Carentan and Bayeux, the estuary of the Orne, and a 15-mile stretch of beaches in the area of Villers and Trouville across the Seine estuary from Le Havre, the town of Honfleur 6 miles east of Le Havre. Our own reports mention only the city of Caen, named by the Prime Minister, who incidentally will report again to Commons tomorrow on the progress of the invasion. He plans to make a daily affair of it. Another late report that bears out the optimism about the landings: Royal Air Force beach squadrons already have landed in France, taking supplies and plane fuel with them, and a steady stream of RAF planes is now crossing the channel to use landing strips already set up on the beach. These planes are part of the 11,000 in that air armada which covered this landing 24 hours ago. All day and all night they've been crisscrossing the channel with absolutely no opposition. In that air armada were 1,000 troop-carrying aircraft, including gliders, and the Allied High Command said this phase of the invasion was executed with unexpected success. Tonight, the Great Allied Sea Armada is standing off France, too. Enemy reports describe a strong Allied naval force cruising in the Dunkirk-Calais area opposite Dover and about 200 miles east of Cherbourg. Again, no Allied confirmation of this. The crew of one of that Allied fleet must be having a particularly fine time. The crew of the battleship Nevada, which was repaired and restored to duty after being badly damaged at Pearl Harbor. Some of the same ships which stood behind us at Salerno are in the action, too. The British cruisers Orion and Mauritius, the battleships Warspite, Nelson, and Romillies, and our own Texas and Arkansas, in addition to the Nevada. Flagship of the fleet is the cruiser Augusta, in which President Roosevelt used to take vacation trips. And the total Allied Navy losses up to noon Tuesday, 2 destroyers and 1 landing craft. Air losses less than 1%. Nothing from any source has given any indication of when or where the inevitable German counterattack will be launched. Indeed, a report from Berlin via Stockholm quotes a German military spokesman as saying that not even walls of burning oil could stop the waves of Allied attackers which stormed the Atlantic Wall. There is no indication that our forces met any such defenses. This same military spokesman has admitted that at Caen, the Allies are holding a bridgehead 16.5 miles deep. Here's a Berlin radio report in a broadcast just monitored by NBC, said the German army has as yet made no move to counterattack the invading Allied forces. Most of the German broadcasts tonight have done a complete flip-flop from those earlier in the day, when they oozed gloom then, admitted taking a licking and so forth. Evidently, Goebbels didn't go for that so much. These later broadcasts have turned boastful again, bragging about German defenses, and the German High Command itself has been very stingy with any definite news. One of the big questions of the day has been exactly why did the Allied commanders choose the beaches they did, and from London tonight comes the answer. Those beaches had been selected for the initial assault many months ago, but only recently did the Germans start seriously to build up the defenses there. Consequently, the beaches were far less heavily gunned and fortified than the great port areas in Denmark, Holland, Belgium, and France. This chosen stretch remained almost without beach obstacles, and the inshore defenses were nothing like as heavy as those stretching for hundreds of miles on either side. That left a breach of about 60 miles between the northern wing of the defenses keyed around the Elbe and Weser estuaries, the Hook of Holland and the ports of Dunkirk, Calais, Boulogne, Dieppe, and Le Havre, and the southern chain running from Cherbourg through Saint-Malo, Brest, Lorient, and Nantes. Well, that's a lot of geography, but it's the answer to that question, though, of why the Allies went in where they did. Allied reconnaissance for months has showed that the Germans have been making very slow progress in converting this 60-mile breach into a strong point. And then, all of a sudden, they found they were too late. In his prayer tonight, which was so deeply moving, President Roosevelt referred to our soldiers when he said, "They yearn but for the end of battle, for their return to the haven of home. Some will never return." And tonight, from a port in southeast England, comes the story of some of those who will never come home. Minesweepers, the first ships to go out and the first ships to come back, brought back German prisoners from France, also the first American dead from France. A British sailor, his face smutty with coal dust and his dark eyes solemn, stood at attention with fixed bayonet at the head of the gangplank. No one cheered as that first minesweeper edged up to the dock. There was a call for someone from the medical corps, and Captain Thomas Newbold of Brooklyn responded. Standing nearby, Chaplain Meyer Miller of Greenwich, Connecticut, said, "We saw them off, and now we see them back." No one else spoke. The first bill was being presented for the invasion of the West. And just here the words of President Roosevelt are timely. "Some will never return. Embrace these, Father, and receive them, thy heroic servants, into thy kingdom." On this great day, when the combined efforts of so many are contributing so much to the success of the invasion, it's difficult to single out individual names. But one must be singled out tonight, Signalman Donald Beale of Grand Falls, Idaho. Beale was on watch on the Augusta, the flagship of Admiral Kirk commanding the Western Naval Task Force. The Augusta had been at sea just over 6 hours this morning, leading a column of transport, when Beale sang out from the signal bridge, "Mine, dead ahead." The flag bridge quickly relayed the word, and a second after that cry, the rudder had been swung hard to starboard, and the Augusta just missed that big floating mine by 20 yards. Thank the sharp eyes of Signalman Beale for averting a possibly serious accident just at one of the most important moments of the invasion. And now some more personal stories from this invasion, news of how the GIs are doing. Murray Silverfarb of the Bronx has set up a barber shop on the beach. Invasion haircuts are his specialty. Murray had never before run a pair of clippers, but he does a nice, clean job, and the GIs like it. The final mail delivery was made to the invasion troops as they awaited aboard assault boats for the takeoff. One soldier got 50 letters at once. Another got one that came by airmail from New York in only 4 days. Some GIs thought it would be good luck to take German aerial cannon shells with them as talismans, good luck pieces for the invasion. But ordnance teams checking up on the weight of equipment took the souvenirs away. As Corporal Clyde Belcher of Greenville, South Carolina, said, they'll get plenty where they're going. General Eisenhower seemed to think it would be good luck if he could talk to a paratrooper from his own state of Kansas. And the general's been smoking a lot of cigarettes in the past 24 hours, sometimes lighting one from the stub of another. Somebody asked him if he were nervous. He replied that he's the type that boils up inside, but that when things got too bad, he's usually able to sleep it off. Our NBC monitors heard Radio Brazzaville broadcasting in the highest excitement from the French Congo tonight that General Eisenhower had already set up headquarters in northern France with a staff which included 4 French marshals. Well, that would be nice, but it's a little early for that. The general's still operating at an advanced outpost in England. Our monitors also heard a more likely report. The London radio, quoting an Allied pilot, is saying that he saw the stars and stripes floating over a French town, not named. And finally, this report from Germany about the reaction of the German people. United Press correspondent Aldo Forti in Bern reports that when they got the news of the successful Allied landings, they were surprised, bewildered, angered, and dumbfounded. Whether in that order, Forti doesn't say. Now some paragraphs from around the country, what invasion meant to America. In Reno, for instance, the city's 2 principal businesses were hard hit. The few gambling houses that were open had only a handful of customers, and the divorce courts did even worse. Only 14 petitions were filed. Here in New York, many stores closed to permit employees to join in prayers and celebrations. A crowd of 50,000 persons knelt under the eternal light in Madison Square, and Mayor LaGuardia read the crowd General Eisenhower's order of the day. The Red Cross announced that telephone calls for appointments to donate blood were coming in at 3 times the usual rate. The New York Daily News printed the Lord's Prayer in the column usually devoted to its editorials. Invasion Day found 14,000 workers still away from their jobs, but thousands of others went back to work in response to pleas to support the fighting forces. Like a gray ghost, the exchange ship Gripsholm tied up at Jersey City today. On board were 51 wounded American soldiers who'd been prisoners of war in Germany. They'd heard the great news at sea. They were in better health already for hearing that news. And John D. Eisenhower had quite a day for his graduation from West Point. The son of the Supreme Commander became a 2nd lieutenant of infantry, as his father was launching the greatest military operation of all time. And a move is on in Denison, Texas, tonight, the birthplace of the general, to rename a street for him. One man who might have been expected to know all about the invasion reveals tonight that he heard about it on the radio. Secretary of War Stimson just happened to wake up, said he was as surprised as anybody else when he tuned in his radio to hear NBC correspondent Wright Bryan of Atlanta telling how he'd just returned from an airplane trip to France where parachute troops were dropped. Reports have been going around in Ankara tonight that there have been Allied landings in the Peloponnesus, and although there's no official confirmation, what are described as responsible quarters in Ankara say tonight that the report could be true now or shortly. The Peloponnesus is that part of Greece south of the Isthmus of Corinth, and when the military experts guess about Allied landings in Greece, that's usually the spot they pick. Latest reports from the Italian front still put American forces 5 miles across the Tiber in pursuit of the disorganized Germans, with Rome piling holiday on holiday. First liberation, now the Western invasion. But today's big story from Rome tells how more than 150 soldiers, mostly Americans, had a surprise audience of Pope Pius today. They'd gathered in front of St. Peter's and asked if they might call on the pontiff. It had been said earlier and officially that no soldiers would be permitted inside the Vatican, that no Germans had been, and none of the Allies would be either. But suddenly that permission came. The group, which included Catholics and Protestants alike, knelt as the Pope blessed them, and he later visited it informally with them, talked in English, asked the Americans what part of the country they were from. When 2 said Washington and New York, the Pope recalled with pleasure his visit here in 1936. The Pope has never received a group of German soldiers in this manner. The American Air Force picked D-Day to stage the first heavy bomber attack from their Russian bases, a new development in the shuttle run against Hitler's Europe, because these heavy bombers returned to their Russian bases instead of going on to Italy or North Africa. The target was Galati, the big German air base in Romania, and the attack was made in direct support of Russian forces staving off German attacks in the Yassi area. We lost no bombers in the attack, but 2 of the supporting Mustang fighters were shot down, exchanged for 6 German fighters knocked over in aerial combat. The Russian High Command itself selected Galati as the target for this first American raid from Russian bases because a blow there would give the greatest support to Red Army operations on the southern front. Portugal lost no time climbing aboard the United Nations bandwagon as it crashed into Western Europe today. Our State Department announces tonight that Portugal has stopped all shipments of tungsten ore to Germany, and more than that, has halted all production of the war art material so necessary for the manufacture of hard steel. The State Department says the negotiations were concluded on June 5th, significantly the originally scheduled D-Day. Perhaps it's not too much to guess that the Portuguese government was given just the barest kind of a hint as to the Allied power. This is Don Hollenbeck in the NBC newsroom in New York, and that's all for now.
This is the National Broadcasting Company. Events of the days to come will decide the course of our history. NBC will interrupt any and all programs to bring you the latest invasion bulletins as they come through. Stay tuned to WEIF New York.
Strings for meditation. Out of the night comes music for reflection, an uninterrupted flow of classic melody featuring Joseph Gorner and the ensemble. A resume of the selections offered during the next 25 minutes will be given at the end of the program, which begins now with At an Old Trysting Place by Edward McDowell. past 25 minutes, you've been enjoying Strings for Meditation, featuring Joseph Gorner and the Ensemble. The classic melodies heard tonight were At an Old Trysting Place by MacDowell, Tambourin by Gretry, the popular selection, All the Things You Are, Valse by Levitsky, Veil Dance by Goldman, Melodie Arabe by Glazunov, Romance by Debussy, Estrelita by Ponte, and finally Serenade by Arensky. Strings for Meditation will come to you again this Thursday at the same time. This is the National Broadcasting Company.
In these historic days, invasion news comes first. NBC will interrupt any and all programs to bring you the latest invasion bulletins. Stay tuned to WEAF.
Here is the latest report on the invasion from the NBC newsroom in New York. NBC's Merrill Muller reports from London this morning an official statement that the original invasion forces which landed in France were put ashore 100% successfully. Muller quotes the Allied Naval Commander, Admiral Sir Bertram Ramsay, as saying that the only losses among the seagoing forces were light combat vessels. Few casualties were suffered aboard these vessels, and the amphibious troops crossed the water without loss. Says Admiral Ramsay, "We have broken the crust and started off on the right foot. We have caught the enemy on the wrong foot. Now we must try not to give him balance." The German radio reports tonight that the Allies have made new landings at the mouth of the Orne River, our men going ashore under cover of naval artillery. From Supreme Allied headquarters in Britain comes word that strong winds are lashing the channel, but that reinforcements would not be halted. The Royal Air Force crossed the channel tonight in what is officially described as great force. There was no immediate report on their targets, but almost certainly German objectives in the invasion path are rocking under a new rain of explosives. NBC has heard a British radio report that RAF personnel, so-called beat squadrons, already have landed on the shores of France. These RAF ground crews have taken supplies and plane fuel with them, ready to start operations on the other side. RAF pilots who came back late yesterday from low-level flights over the invasion areas told of Allied barrage balloons flying over the beachheads. Also, no sign of enemy resistance along the beaches themselves. The first eyewitness report from an Allied reporter with invasion ground troops says that in 2 hours and 45 minutes, one Canadian force won its beachhead and shoved on inland. This account says that German tanks were about 10 or 15 miles away from that Allied position. Some reports have reached London that General Montgomery's troops have cut the Paris to Cherbourg Railroad at Caen, but this is not official. Up to this hour, no word has come of any single major engagement. The news that our soldiers are fighting inside the French town of Caen was first disclosed by Prime Minister Churchill in Commons, and this morning later on, Mr. Churchill will make another statement giving overnight developments. This report on the invasion came to you from the NBC newsroom in New York. Charles Berry speaking. This is the National Broadcasting Company.
American Army in history is battering at Fortress Europe. The latest invasion bulletins will be broadcast as soon as they're received by the NBC newsroom. Stay tuned to WEAF.
Pagliacci of the piano. Broadcasting Company takes pleasure in presenting music by Joe Reichman, the Pagliacci of the piano and his famous orchestra, entertaining from popular Biltmore Bowl, the world-famous Biltmore Hotel, right here in the city of Los Angeles, California. The spotlight, locally at least, goes to lovely Maureen O'Connor and Ray Foster during this half hour of dancing. And right about now, we bring in Joe Reichman to say a few words. How about that, Joe? Good evening, Joe. How are you?
Thank you, Val. I'll make it a few tonight. I know how you are about that.
You know how I am about it.
And
well, how about all these lovely people, Joe, up along the NBC chain of stations?
I hope they're all tuned
across
in.
the nation.
Last night, a lot of people, we have a lot of wires today.
Indeed, we have, Joe, and some very good news, and
I
hope
have,
it continues to be.
Hundreds of wires today. Hundreds of wires came in today, Val. There it is.
Oh, good. That's wonderful, Joe.
This one from a boy who used to play saxophone with me, liked the band, and asked for his job back. Friends, our first number is entitled Once Too Often. Time, and we're mighty proud that first up, lovely, charming, enchanting Maureen O'Connor. Sing for the folks, Maureen.
I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. Children's carousel, the chestnut trees wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you.
friend, now a gesture in respect to our good neighbors. It's the good neighbor policy night. It's bim, bam, boom, my Roomba. That's just the type of enthusiasm we want as an entrance for Ray Foster, who sings another lovely ballad, To Heavens.
coat of moonbeams, but with the stars I'm thrilled to high heaven. Just feeling your touch, my heaven. I love you so much, and while our lips are making memories, this moment is divine. I see to heaven, and both of them are mine. Thank you, friends. We're mighty proud to present another very electrifying performance by Miss O'Connor. Maureen sings, "Sing Went the Strings of My Heart."
Dear, when you smiled at me, I heard a melody. It haunted me from the start. Something inside of me started a symphony. Sing with the strings of my heart. 'Twas like a breath of spring. I heard a robin sing about a nest set apart. All nature seemed to be in perfect harmony. Sing with the strings of my heart. Your eyes made sky seem blue again. What else could I do again but keep repeating through again? I love you, love you. I still recall the thrill. I guess I always will. I hope 'twill never depart. Dear, with your lips to mine, a rhapsody divine. Sing with the strings of my heart. Your eyes make sky seem blue again. What else could I do again but keep repeating through again? I love you, love you. I still recall the thrill. I guess I always will. I hope we'll never depart. Dear, with your lips to mine, a rhapsody divine. Sing with the strings of my heart.
Joe, I swear you're getting to be a regular producer here. You timed that right out on the nose so that we came out just past 15 minutes past 11. And time, ladies and gentlemen, for the announcer to come in and remind people who've just joined our program that this program is being sent by the National Broadcasting Company, including Joe Reichman, the Pagliacci of the piano, and his famous orchestra, vocalists Maureen O'Connor and Ray Foster, entertaining from popular Biltmore Bowl, a world-famous Biltmore Hotel right here in the center of Los Angeles, California. Now, Joe, besides good news, what else do you have coming up for us right now?
Well, we have, besides excellent news, a beautiful tune entitled Moonlight Whispers.
lost about 5 pounds there trying to figure out what key I came out of and how to get back in the key I came out of. Ray Foster, don't laugh, boys. I knew it all the time. Ray Foster, friends, sings for you, and I love this little ditty. Let's sing a song about Susie.
About Susie, that pretty little, witty little Susie, with the big brown eyes and the turned-up nose and the big blue bow in her hair. Let's sing a song about Susie, that naughty little Susie, with the dimpled chin and the cutest grin and the darndest innocent stare. Oh, she's as sweet as a bun, and she's second to none. What's more, she's a bundle of joy and a barrel of fun. Let's sing a song about Susie. You gotta go for someone so divine. But if you want to make love to Susie, no can do, mustn't touch. She's mine. Second to none. What's more, she's a bottle of joy and a barrel of fun. Let's sing a song about Susie. You gotta go for someone so divine. But if you want to make love to Susie, no can do, mustn't touch. She's mine.
Fine, boys, fine. Thank you, Raymond. Let's sing a song about Susie. Ballad time once again, ladies and gentlemen. Spring will be a little late this year, and very commendably sung by Maureen O'Connor. Thank you so much. Let's see now. We have a holiday for strings. We've converted this very wonderful composition into a piano solo. Boys, if you will, please. Holiday for strings.
you, Maureen. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a very pleasant half hour, at least from this end of the line. And we trust that you've all enjoyed it fully as much as we've enjoyed sending it to you. The National Broadcasting Company has sent you music by Joe Reitman, the Pagliacci of the piano and his famous orchestra, entertaining nightly from popular Biltmore Bowl, the world-famous Biltmore Hotel in the city of Los Angeles, California. And now, until you hear from us right soon again, this is Al Brown saying good night to you all, and very good news. This is the National Broadcasting Company.
A staff of NBC reporters is standing by at invasion headquarters in the capitals of the world to give you the most detailed coverage of the invasion news. Stay tuned to WEAF New York.
Invasion news. Allied forces in France are pushing inland at many points after clearing dazed Nazi soldiers from the beaches of Normandy. Despite stormy weather, reinforcements continue to stream across the channel. A late German Transocean news agency broadcast claims that fierce German counterattacks have been launched east of Cherbourg. The Nazi agency asserts that shortly after midnight, strong Nazi bomber formations attacked Allied warships and landing craft off the Bay of the Seine and north of Le Havre. There has been no Allied confirmation of these enemy claims. Also, the enemy agency admits that the Allies have made further landings at the mouth of the Orne River under cover of naval artillery fire. Dispatches have reached Allied headquarters indicating that General Sir Bernard Montgomery's troops have cut the Paris-Cherbourg Railway at Caen. However, there has been no official announcement of such operation. The German High Command still insists that no Allied forces have penetrated Caen. Here's a bulletin aboard an American headquarters ship at the Cherbourg Peninsula. American parachutists have the village of Saint-Martin-de-Barbille, known to be a German strong point, commanding much of the beaches. Saint-Martin is 3 to 4 miles east of the coast on the main road up the peninsula between Charcot and Boulogne. Prime Minister Winston Churchill, in announcing that the invasion was proceeding satisfactorily, has disclosed that Allied troops were fighting in Caen. And from that town, 9 miles inland on the River Orne, a network of roads and railways radiates over northern Normandy. Caen, thus far, is the only point which has been named by headquarters as the scene of fighting, although Allied penetrations as deep as 13 miles have been announced. And that's the latest invasion news, and continuing now NBC's all-night service to its listeners, we take you to San Francisco.
And here, ladies and gentlemen, is the kind of music Pancho's famous for, Coast to Coast. Featuring Antonio, it's the bolero Taboo. Gentlemen, from the mural room of world-famous Hotel St. Francis in San Francisco, NBC is sending you the distinctive dance rhythms of Pancho and his orchestra. Now the dance continues as lovely Mary Lane sings, "Someday I'll Meet You Again."
And I'm yours until then. Each night I'll wish on a star that you'll
Now, ladies and gentlemen, Pancho is going to play the well-known Huaracho for you, for which he's noted all over the country. This one's titled Oye el Cabanero.
Another brief reminder, ladies and gentlemen, that from San Francisco's St. Francis Hotel, NBC is broadcasting the dance rhythms of Pancho and his orchestra. And now the dance continues again, and the orchestra plays one of Frank Lesser's latest and best, Someday I'll Meet You Again. A Frank Lesser tune, but as you undoubtedly recognize, the title was Spring Will Be a Little Late This Year. Now we're going to have a Cole Porter tune featuring Pancho's music and lovely Mary Lane to sing, I Love You.
once more she sees daffodils. It's spring again, and birds on the wing again start to sing again the old melody. I love you. That's the song of songs, and it all belongs to you and me.
Now to top off a swell show, Pancho plays that lively Brazilian march, La Jardineira. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of this memorable evening's entertainment, presenting the music of Pancho and his orchestra, playing here in the beautifully appointed mural room of world-famous Hotel St. Francis, overlooking historic Union Square in San Francisco. Pancho presents the songs of lovely Mary Lane and of Antonio with his bongo drums. Now it's time to say hasta luego from San Francisco. This is the National Broadcasting Company.
The day of reckoning is here, the most crucial time in the history of the world. NBC will interrupt any and all programs to bring you the latest invasion bulletins. Stay tuned to WEIF.
This is Don Goddard in the NBC newsroom in New York. There's the full light of another day over the beaches of northern France at this hour. It's 9 o'clock in the morning over there, and that light discloses great activity throughout the whole area of Normandy that is now in Allied hands. For today comes the second phase of our invasion of Western Europe. By this time, there should be sharp and savage fighting. That is, if the Germans have launched those counterattacks they've been boasting about and denying all night long. And on the beaches themselves, beside the channel whipped by the strong winds that followed our landings yesterday, and under the protective barrage balloons overhead and the jeeps and the bulldozers and trucks scurry down there on the beaches, and landing barges and supply ships scrape along the sands constantly, bringing in an endless supply of the sinews of war, strengthening with every moment that passes the strength of our forces now dug in on the soil of France. That bad weather that the commanders feared yesterday, that they worried about last night, apparently has not developed in enough strength to stop our movement of supplies, nor to stop the flights of our fighter and bomber planes overhead. For overhead there is the ceaseless drone of planes. They swing far inland to support some company of paratroopers or an advance patrol of scouts, flushing Nazis on the bridgehead. 100% effective, so our military and naval authorities said when the day ended in the darkness of last night. And that was about the last official word we've had to go on as this new day brightens. The map of invasion is still based on the information we had yesterday. We still hold that crescent-shaped piece of land that swings from Cherbourg around the mouth of the River Seine to Le Havre. We are fighting on the promontory of the Norman Peninsula to the west, and we may have made further landings to the east. Possibly some of our paratroopers have gone inland as far as 41 miles. We have no official word on that as yet. And this lack of news, official news that is, for there's no lack of prattle that passes for news from the Nazi-controlled radio, is not necessarily alarming today. For we still have the assurances of our leaders that all is going better than expected. President Roosevelt said that satisfactory progress was being made, you remember. But the optimism of the first day, the optimism of yesterday, the satisfaction of yesterday, now is tempered, now that the first phase of the invasion has passed. For now, as the second phase approaches, the repulsion of counterblows, the further securing the positions we now hold, we face the task that lies ahead, the task that lies ahead of those men around the mouth of the River Seine. There will be other landings all along the coast, of course, probably as soon as the Germans have launched their attacks in the Seine head, as soon as some of their strength has been drawn to that focal point. But the news, Allied official news, will start rolling very soon again. Prime Minister Churchill has announced his intention of making a regular daily report to the House of Commons. And the morning should produce communique number 8 from General Eisenhower. And we will have more and more of the eyewitness stories from men who are coming back to England, and other reporters who are now filing their copy and making their broadcast records right on the beaches of France. And, of course, the German radio will continue to put out feelers and statements intended to confuse us, and Tokyo will continue to amuse us. Meanwhile, we have a few late dispatches. The British report, which was monitored by NBC here this morning, said that invasion troops north of Caen have pushed their way inland to a depth of 13 miles at one point. And we have a story here, a very odd story from Stockholm. It says a Copenhagen dispatch of the German-controlled STB agency said today that German naval authorities admit they are considering the possibility of a Russian invasion of Denmark. A Russian invasion of Denmark down the Baltic Sea. And Moscow's midnight bulletin gives indications that the Germans are weakening in their 8-day battle near Yasi, and that the Russians are ever nearer to their own new offensive. The offensive which was to be timed with our landings in Western Europe. And this is Don Goddard speaking from the NBC newsroom in New York.
This is the National Broadcasting Company.